Hey everyone, in today's tutorial I'll be teaching you how to make a crochet Among Us character. Before we get into everything, I do like to show you guys all of my practice pieces, so I'll show you that in the next couple of clips, but if you want to skip to what you'll need, you can go ahead and do that, but in the next clips I will show you all of my practice pieces. This guy right here was my first character I made. I actually really hate it, so I'm going to cut it up and I'm going to use the stuffing for a different project. But this leg right here, I don't know why I made it so short, so that's one thing I changed. I did keep the eye. I did change the shape of this, and then one other thing I changed was the backpack because I didn't like how it looks. I don't know why I did it this way originally, but you know, it is a practice piece, so you have to go through all of your mistakes first. So this was the first one I made, and then I'll show you the second one next. This guy right here was the second pattern I wrote up, and I do like it a little bit more. So what I changed was the length of the legs, which I do like, so I kept it on my last pattern. I did kind of like the length of this. I felt like it looked good, but I still felt like it was a little bit too long, so I did change the length. The eye, I changed it from the original piece, but I prefer the first one, so I kept that first one. And then for the head piece, I did change it. I kind of like the shape of this. Well, I don't like the shape of this right now, but when I did it for the second time, I kept the same pattern. The only difference that I did was I stuffed it a little bit more, and I think it looks better. And then I did add the leaf, and the backpack is changed on this guy. I do like this one much more than that first one I showed you, so I'll show you the comparisons so you can see these two. I feel like this one looks a little bit better. I don't know, I kind of didn't like the way that this part looks at the bottom, and it just looks like a little bit misshapen to me. I felt like this one looked a little bit better. So this was my first rough draft. This is my second. You can see the differences. So I'll show you the final one. This is the final guy, and you already saw him in the beginning of this video, but I think it looks so cute. It looks so much better in my opinion. I like the length of this. I kept the backpack, as you can see here. This is the first eye, and I kept the length of the legs. The only difference was I changed the length of the body from this. I think I took out 3 rows, and I felt like it looked a little bit better because I felt like he looked just a little bit too long. For the leaf, it's kind of the same. The only difference was I added a little bit more yarn around the stem portion. Here are my 3 pieces lined up together. You can see my first one, my second, and third. I feel like the differences are kind of minor, but it does make a big difference in my opinion. I know it's just like small differences between each of these, but I feel like it looks really good, and it did take me a lot of work, so hopefully you guys like this video, but I have another story before we get into it. I know this intro is very long, but you can go ahead and skip ahead if you want to find out what you need for this video, but let me just tell you what happened. So this was my final piece. I had part 1 of this video already done. It was edited. It was an hour long, and then I had uploaded part 2 already because I needed to save storage space, but I didn't upload part 1 because I didn't finish this guy yet, so I couldn't film an intro. So what ended up happening was I lost 1 hour of footage. So I lost this whole thing, the base of this guy, and I was so upset. I was like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? But I still had part 2 and 3 left, so I decided I'm going to refilm this, which I'm actually going to do right after I film this intro. But so the base of this, I did use orange for part 2 and 3. Since I lost all of that footage for part 1, I will be using a different color, but just to let you know, I do stick with the orange for the part 2 and 3. Just part 1 has to be changed because all of my footage is gone. So anyways, now that I told you that, I'll let you know what you'll need in the next couple of clips. One more thing before I tell you what you need. In part 1, we're only focusing on the base, so we're starting from the bottom up. It's just going to be this body here. You'll only need 1 color of yarn. In part 2, we're going to be focusing on the eye, and then part 3, we're doing the leaf and the backpack. So if you skip my story and you went straight to what you need for this video, I will tell you that in part 2 and 3 I am using the color orange because part 1 I lost all of my footage, so I'm refilming that right now, and I will be using this Big Twist value yarn in the color watermelon. For the orange, I did use, I think it's varsity orange or just regular orange. It's still the same brand, the Big Twist value yarn. There is about 380 yards in one of these. I did use a little bit more than half of this for the base and the backpack. So remember that for this video, I'm just doing the base and I'm going to be doing it pink, but when you see the other clip, it's going to be in orange for part 2 and 3. In part 1, I'm also using a 4.5mm crochet hook, 2 stitch markers, scissors and stuffing, and of course you need more stuffing than this because this project is a little bit bigger. Almost forgot to mention, but you will also need a threading needle for yarn. We're going to be working from the bottom up, so we need to start off with one of our legs. So for round 1 of our first leg, we're going to make a magic circle. So let's take our yarn, and I'm going to wrap it around 3 fingers. I now have this X on the top. I'm going to go inside the circle, And I'm going to grab this front yarn and pull it through the circle, and I twist it up. And now I'm going to be working with this yarn right here. So I'm going to go under and grab it and pull it through the loop. Then I'm going to just let go, and I have my circle there. So you will be working around the circle and this yarn right here. If you pull on this yarn, you can tighten up your circle. Don't pull it too much because you will have to work into it. Now that we have our magic circle, let's single crochet 6 times into the circle. So remember, I said you have to go around the circle and this yarn. So I'm going to take my hook and go inside the circle. I'm grabbing this yarn to pull it through. I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through both loops. That is 1 single crochet. I need to do that 5 more times for a total of 6. So I will show that one more time. Let's go inside our circle, grabbing this yarn and pulling it through. There's my 2 loops. I'm going to yarn over and pull through both loops. Okay, so now I'm going to show that one more time before I speed this up. So I'm going to go take my hook and put it inside the circle. I'm grabbing this yarn and I'm pulling it through. I have my 2 loops. I'm yarning over and pulling through both. So now I'll speed this process up until I get my 6 single crochets. And remember, you can pull on this yarn to make the circle a little bit smaller. I do like working in tighter spaces because I feel like it's a little bit easier for me, but you don't have to do that if it's a little bit too hard for you. Now I have my 6 single crochets, so after I do that, I can pull on this yarn to tighten my circle up. And then you are done with round 1. Usually I would slip stitch into the first stitch, but I stopped doing that. So now I'm just going to take my stitch marker and place it into that last single crochet I did. And now we're done with the end of round 1. For round 2, we're going to increase into every stitch. So an increase is 2 single crochets. So let's go into our first stitch. I'm just pushing it through the stitch. I'm grabbing my yarn and pulling it through. I have 2 loops. I'm yarning over and pulling through both loops. So that was 1 single crochet into the first stitch. I need to do 1 more into the same stitch. So let's go in for another single crochet. There's my 2 loops, yarning over, pulling through both. So I'll show you that one more time into the next stitch. So going into the next stitch, I'm doing another increase. So let's go in, grab this yarn, 2 loops, yarn over, pull through both. Going into the same stitch because this is an increase. There's the 2 loops, yarning over and pulling through both. So now I'm going to speed this up until I get to my last stitch. At the stitch marker, you'll do your last increase and you'll have a total of 12 stitches in round 2. I'm at my stitch marker, so I'm just going to remove that and I'll do my last increase. So this is going to be 11 and 12. And then I'll put my stitch marker back in and we're done with round 2. Round 3, we're going to start off with an increase into the first stitch. So there's my first stitch. I'm going to do an increase. Remember, that is 2 single crochets. So I just did 1 single crochet. Now I'm going to do my second into the same stitch. And then into the next stitch, I'm going to do 1 single crochet. So going into this guy here, and I'm just doing 1 single crochet. Now I have to repeat those 2 steps all the way through until I get to 18 stitches in total. So it's just a repeat of an increase and a single crochet, and I will demonstrate that one more time. So going into my next stitch, I need to increase. So that was 1, and my second one into the same stitch. Now into the next one, I'll do 1 single crochet. And now I'm going to repeat that until I get to 18 stitches. At the stitch marker, I should have 1 single crochet left to do. I finished round 3, so I now have 18 stitches. Moving on to round 4, we're going to start off with another increasing round. So let's increase into the first stitch. Remember, this is 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And then we're going to single crochet into the next 1 2 stitches. So let's do 1 single crochet here and another single crochet into the next one. And now I have to repeat those 3 steps all the way through until I end up with 24 stitches in total, and I will repeat that. So let's go into the next stitch with an increase. So that's 1, 2, and now we're going to single crochet into the next 1, 2 stitches. So that is 1, going into the next one for 1 more single crochet. Now repeat those steps until you get to 24 stitches in total. At the stitch marker, you should have 1 single crochet left to do. Moving on to round 5, let's start off with an increase into the first stitch. So there's my first stitch. We're doing 1 single crochet and another single crochet into the same stitch. Now I'm going to single crochet into the next 1, 2, 3 stitches. So here's 1, 2, and 3. Now you have to repeat those 4 steps until you get to your stitch marker where you're going to end up with 1 single crochet left to do. You should have a total of 30 stitches in this round once you're done. So let me show that one more time. So going into the next stitch, I'm going to go in with an increase. So that's 1, 2, and then now I'm single crocheting into the next 1, 2, 3 stitches. So there goes my first one. Going into the next stitch for another single crochet, and then the next one for my 3rd single crochet. Now I'm going to repeat this until I get to my stitch marker, and I'll do my last single crochet. Finish round 5, so I now have my 30 stitches in that round. Moving on to round 6, we're going to do our last increasing round for this leg. Let's start off with an increase into the first stitch. So that's 2 single crochets into your first stitch, and then we're going to single crochet into the next 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. So just 1 single crochet in each of those. So that's my first one, my second, third, and my 4th. Now you have to repeat those 5 steps until you get to your stitch marker where you're going to end up with 1 single crochet left. You should have a total of 36 stitches in this round, and I will demonstrate that one more time. So going into my next stitch, I have to start off with an increase. So that's 1, 2 single crochets into that same stitch. Now I'm single crocheting into the next 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. Just 1 single crochet in each of those. 2, and that's my 3rd one, and my 4th. So now I'm going to repeat this until I finish this round. After I finish round 6, this is what it looks like. I now have 36 stitches in total in this round. So for the next rounds, you're just going to be single crocheting, and that will be rounds 7 to round 19. Because you're not changing anything, it's just a single crochet, you should still have 36 stitches in total in each of those rounds. What we're doing here is just creating the length. So this is what it will look like after you finish rounds 7 to round 19. Now I won't be showing all the clips of me crocheting that because I don't have enough storage space and I can't afford to lose more video footage, so I'll just show a couple of clips. But remember, 7 to 19, you're just going to single crochet, and you probably want to have like a little notepad so you can write down what row you're on so you don't lose track. I just finished rounds 7 to round 19, and I just did my last single crochet, so you can remove your stitch marker once you're done because we're now going to create the length in between both of the legs. So what we're going to do first is just, let me put my hook back in, and now I'm going to start off with a chain 1. We're going to count new rows now, so this is going to be row 1. Let's chain 1, and to chain you need to yarn over and pull through. So now I'm going to turn my work, and now my hand is on the inside of the leg, and we're going to single crochet 8 times. That chain we did is going to count as a stitch, but I'll explain that a little bit later. So we're going to go into our stitch. So you're going to go into the second one here. Well, you can see this little corner piece that I'm not going into. I'm going into this guy. So that's going to be 1 single crochet. My second, third, fourth, fifth, this one's 6, 7, and 8. So in total, we're going to call it 9 stitches because that chain 1 I did is going to count as one of my stitches. Now moving on to row 2, let's start off with a chain 1. So let's yarn over a hook and pull through, and then we're going to turn our work, and now we're on the outside. So remember I said a chain does count as a stitch, so that's going to be the first one, and then that means you're not going into this corner stitch right here because that is counted as a stitch. Now we're going to single crochet 8 times, so you go into this guy here, and this is 1 single crochet, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I know this one is going to be a little bit hard to see, but remember I said the chain counts as a stitch, so you're crocheting into this chain here. So this is going to be 8. We just did 8 single crochets, but it's 9 stitches in total because the chain 1 does count as a stitch. So let's count it so I can show you what it looks like. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then this chain right here is 9. So I'm going to repeat that one more time before I go off camera. This is row 3, and every time you start a new row, you need to chain 1. So I just yarn over and pull through. Then I'm going to turn my work. And now I'm going to single crochet 8 times. You don't go into this corner stitch because that chain 1 does count as one of your stitches. So let's single crochet 8 times. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and here is that corner spot, that chain 1 area that you're also single crocheting into, and that was 8 single crochets, but remember 9 in total because this chain counts as a stitch. Now you need to repeat that for row 4 and row 5. I will finish those parts off camera. I just finished row 4 and 5, and this is what it looks like. So now we can cut off some of the yarn, but we will need to cut off excess because you will use this to sew it a little bit later. So what I'm going to do is just take, I don't know the exact amount of this, but just take some excess yarn, and what you're going to do after you cut it, you see this loop here, you're going to take this yarn and put it through the loop and just tighten it that way. And then I'm just going to stuff it back in for now because we're done with one leg. Now that we have one of the legs finished, you will need to create a second one. If you forgot how to make the leg, you can go back to the beginning of this video. But for your second leg, all you're following is the bottom base and up to row 19 of the single crochets. You are not going to create this part for the second leg. You're going to stop at row 19, and then I'll show you how to attach it in the next clip. Now I have both of my legs, so with the leg that you just finished without the extra flap, what you're going to do is, see how you have your stitch marker from that last single crochet did? You want to now take your second stitch marker, and we're going to count 9 stitches apart. So remember how this right here was a row of 9 in total? You're going to do the same thing here by just splitting it apart. So where the stitch marker is going to be 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and at the 9th stitch, I'm just going to add my stitch marker. Now that we have both of our stitch markers attached, let's go back into our loop so we can single crochet this together. So I'm going to take the leg with the flap and this side. I'm leaving that stitch marker there, and I'm just going to single crochet this together. I'm just going to single crochet it to the end of this leg, and I'm holding it really close together. I'm going into this corner. It's not really a stitch, but I'm going to this corner piece, yarning over, pulling through. There's the 2 loops on the hook, yarning over, pulling through both. Remember, it's just a single crochet. So we attached it with a single crochet, and after we single crocheted the corner together, we're just going to single crochet 4 more times into the middle. So let's do, that was 1, 2, 3, and 4. After you single crocheted 4 times into the middle, we're now going to single crochet 28 times into this leg. So I will speed this forward because it's just a single crochet, but these are easier to see because they're actual stitches. So again, I'm just single crocheting 28 times. That was 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to speed this up. I just finished single crocheting 28 times. So to add this up, you have 28 on this leg plus 4 and then the 1 that we used to attach the 2 legs together. So in total, you should have 33 stitches right now. You are not counting where the stitch marker is. You want to start right here, and that's going to be 1 current for right now. So this is 1, and then after you finish 28, you should have a total of 33 stitches. And now we're just going to repeat that to this side. So we're going to attach it. I keep losing my train of thought because I'm still not over the fact that I lost all this video footage, 1 hour and 7 hours worth of work. So let's go on to this side. Now, as you can see at this corner right here, I'm not going into this stitch. I'm just going to go kind of sort of like the one right after it. This one is not a stitch, so I don't really know what to call it, but let's go into this guy right here for a single crochet of 4 at this middle because we're repeating what's on this side. So I'm single crocheting 4 times into the middle. So this is 1 single crochet, 2, 3, and 4 at this end right here. Okay, so just to recap so I don't lose anyone, what we did was single crochet to connect the leg. We did 4 single crochets in this middle, and then we did 28 single crochets, which total up to 33 stitches. Now we're going to repeat that, which I just did, the 4 single crochets in the middle, and now I have to single crochet the sides together. So you can see that's why we put the stitch marker right here. If you need to, you can remove the stitch marker, but I can insert the hook through with the stitch marker still there. So we're just going to connect it with a single crochet. So I'm taking my hook and inserting it into where the stitch marker is. And then I'm grabbing this yarn to pull it through. I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm yarning over and pulling through both loops. So that's how I just connected. Repeat everything. We have to single crochet our last 28. So your last 28 stitch will be into this stitch marker. This is the original stitch marker that you have. So after you finish that, you should have a total of 66 stitches, because if you add this up, 5 plus the 28 plus 5 plus another 28, it equals 66. So I'm going to finish my 28 and then I'll be back. I made it to my stitch marker, so I'm just going to remove it and I'm going to do my last single crochet. I'll put my stitch marker back in, and now I'm going to count everything just to make sure. You should have a total of 66 stitches now. Okay, so I just counted and I do have my 66 stitches in this round. So now I can take this stitch marker. This is a second stitch marker that you don't need. It was just there so we can keep track of where we need to single crochet the 2 sides together. So I'm just going to take that out and remove it. And now before we get onto the next rounds, we're going to take this yarn. Remember, this is the yarn that I told you that we're using to sew later on. We're going to sew these 2 sides together. So I'm just going to take that yarn and I'm taking my threading needle. Just going to insert that really quick. And then I'm just going to sew the sides together. So I'm not doing anything special. It's just normal. I'm going into one side, the other side of where the yarn is not connected, and I'm just going to go in. So just like this. and I'm going to push my needle through and sew it together. Now, I don't know how other people join legs. It's probably better than my video, but this is what I'm doing. This is the first time I'm joining a leg together. Well, not the first time. You saw my practice pieces if you didn't skip that part of the video. But okay, so I'm just going to take it from this side, going into the next stitch on the other side of the leg, just closing it up. So this is what it currently looks like on the inside, and that's the outside. So now for the last one, I'm just going to go into that last little space I have, and I'm not going to pull all the way, so let's see how I can show this. So you can see this loop here. I'm just going to put it through, like hold it on one finger so it doesn't go all the way through. So when I pull this, you can see it's still caught here. So I have that loop. I'm just going to take the needle and put it through this loop, pull it through, and that's just one way I secure it. And you can do that a couple more times. So I'm going to go into another stitch, do the same thing. I'll pull it through, but not all the way. I'll keep it on my thumb to make sure it doesn't go all the way through. Take the needle, go into the loop. And I'm going to keep this yarn as stuffing for the inside. So we're done with connecting the leg. This leg is connected, we're going to start off with new rounds. So I'm counting this round as the body part. So for round 1 to round 25, all you're doing is single crocheting this entire round. So I will not be showing that on camera because, again, storage space issues. So what you're going to do is just have 1 to 25. You do want a notepad just to keep track of where you are, and this is just going to create the length of our body. Now you're going to notice that the stitch marker kind of moves and it's going to go to the side a bit. That's totally normal. It's going to be fine. Just make sure you have 66 stitches in total for each round because you are not changing anything. It's just going to be all single crochet rows. So again, do round 1 to round 25, and then I'll be back to finish this off. I will show myself crocheting just a little bit, but this is my first row of just all of my single crochets, and I know I keep mentioning this, but I still can't get over how I lost 1 hour of footage. I was so satisfied with that work for once, and then I'm doing this over now. But you know what? This is a really cute color, so I'm excited that I'll have this one. I actually haven't even played the game yet. So, but someone requested this video, so that's why I'm doing it. But yeah, this is round 1 of single crochets, and I'll probably be back within a week to finish the top part because I have other things to do, so I don't think I can finish this today. Just finished round 1 of the body. You can see I have 1 mark down here, so I need 24 more rows to go. I'll be back in 1 week because I won't be able to finish this today, but this is what it currently looks like. Nothing too much of a difference right now, but you're going to notice that your stitch marker moves to the side. Don't worry, that's totally fine. Just make sure you still have your 66 stitches in total for each of those rounds, and then I'll be back to show you how we can start off our decreases. Okay, so it's actually a day later now, and I finished row 1 to row 25, and in each of those rows, remember, we do have a stitch count of 66, and you can see my stitch marker did move to the side a bit. But now let's start our decreasing round. We are now on row 26, and we're going to start off by single crocheting into the next 21 stitches. So I'm going into this first one for 1 single crochet, and we've been single crocheting so long now, so I'm going to skip ahead since we already know how to do this. And remember, I'm just single crocheting 21 times. Just single crocheted 21 times, and as you can see, I'm now at the corner of the leg. So at this side right here, I'm going to start my first invisible decrease. And if you've seen my videos before, I've shown a different way to do an invisible decrease because that's how I was taught, but I recently saw another video on how to do it, so I'm going to show you this new way because I do like it better. To do this invisible decrease, we're going to be working into these 2 stitches here, and we're going into the front loop only. Okay, so to go into the front loop, let's go into our first stitch and just insert our hook and go straight out through the middle. So this is just the front loop. So now what you just did is just go into the front loop of our first stitch, and you need to do that for the second one as well. So you're not yarning over or anything yet. Let's just go into the next stitch and do the exact same thing, but inserting your hook and going only into the front loop. So I now have 3 loops on the hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2. So just 1, 2. I have 2 loops left. I'm going to yarn over and pull through the last 2, and that is an invisible decrease. So you can see it kind of looks just like our normal single crochet. Now we've done an invisible decrease, let's single crochet into the next 31 stitches, and I will speed ahead for this part because they're just single crochets. Remember, it's 31 single crochets. After you finish single crocheting 31 times, we're now going to do another invisible decrease. So we're going into these 2 stitches right here, and we're going into the front loop only. So let's go into this front one here, push through the middle. Now you have 2 loops on the hook. Let's go again to the next stitch over, going into the front loop only. There's our 3 loops. Let's yarn over and pull through the first 1, 2. We have 2 loops left. Let's yarn over and pull through the last 2. That's going to be our last invisible decrease for this round. So now all you have to do is single crochet these last 10 stitches, and you should end up with 64 stitches in total for round 26. So I just finished round 26. I now have 64 stitches in total. Now when I do my single crochets, I'm not going to demonstrate most of it because it's just going to take up storage in my phone, and I want to save that for when I show the decreases. So now moving on to round 27, we're actually going to start off with an invisible decrease. Go into our first 2 stitches here. We're going to just take our crochet hook and go into the first front loop only of this stitch. So remember, just poke through the front into the middle, and then you're going straight into the next stitch. So at this next stitch, just insert your hook through the middle. Now we have 3 loops on the hook. Let's yarn over and pull it through both of the front 2 loops. And then now we're going to yarn over and pull through the last 2. So that's an invisible decrease. Now we have to single crochet 14 times. So I'm going to go into this next one. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'm going to finish the rest off camera. So to recap what we just did for round 27, we started off with an invisible decrease, and then we single crocheted 14 times. Now you have to repeat those steps all the way through until you get to the end of the stitch marker. At the stitch marker, you should have 1 single crochet left to do, and you'll end up with a total of 60 stitches. But before I go off camera, I do want to show the invisible decrease one more time. So we have our 2 stitches here. We're going into the front loop only of the first stitch, going into the front loop of the next stitch. There's our 3 loops, yarning over, pulling through the first 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2, and now I have to single crochet 14, and then I'll finish the rest off camera. Just finished round 27, and as you can see, it's like slightly curving in now. And remember, for that round we just did an invisible decrease and single crocheting into the next 14, and then you repeat those 2 steps, and now we have 60 stitches. So for round 28, you're just doing single crochets, so it's pretty simple. You're still going to have 60 stitches in total, and then I will finish this part off camera because these are just single crochets. Remember, all single crochets, so you're still ending up with 60 stitches in total. Okay, so now moving on to round 29, we're going to go back to our decreasing round. So let's start off with an invisible decrease into these 2 stitches here. So let's take our hook and go into the front loop only of this first stitch. Now we're going to do the same thing to the next stitch, just taking our hook and inserting it into the front loop. There's our 3 loops. Let's yarn over and pull through the first 2. Yarn over and pull through the last 2, and that was our invisible decrease. So now we're going to single crochet into the next 13 stitches. Okay, so to recap what we just did, we started off with an invisible decrease, and then we single crocheted into the next 13 stitches. You have to repeat those 2 steps all the way through until you end up with 56 stitches in total. So at the stitch marker, you will end up with 1 single crochet left to do, and I will demonstrate the decrease one more time before I go off camera to finish everything. So for the invisible decrease, we have to go into these 2 stitches here, and we're going into the front loop only. So going into this first stitch, I'm just pushing it in to the middle, doing it the same thing to the next stitch. There's my 3 loops on the hook, yarning over, pulling through the first 2, yarning over, pulling through the last 2. Now I have to single crochet 13 times and repeat this process until I get to my stitch marker to end up with 56 stitches in total for round 29. Just finished round 29, so I have my 56 stitches. For round 30, we're only doing a single crochet, so I won't demonstrate this one on camera, but remember, it's just all single crochet, so you will still end up with 56 stitches in total for round 30. Back for round 31, let's start off with our invisible decrease into the first 2 stitches. So here's my first 2. I'm going into the front loop only, the first stitch, doing the same thing to the second stitch. There's my 3 loops on the hook. I'm yarning over and pulling through the first 1, 2, yarning over, pulling through the last 1, 2. Now we're going to single crochet into the next 12 stitches. I just finished my 12 single crochet, so let me do a recap. We started off with our invisible decrease, and then we single crocheted into the next 12 stitches. You need to repeat those 2 steps all the way through until you get to your stitch marker, where you should have 1 single crochet left to do, and you will also end up with 52 stitches in this round. So let me show the decrease one more time. Not sure if I mentioned, but this is round 31. So we're going into these next 2 stitches here and going into the front loop only. There's the first one. Going into the second one, there's my 3 loops. I'm yarning over and pulling through the first 1, 2, yarning over, pulling through the last 1, 2. So now I have to single crochet my 12 stitches, and then I'll repeat this process until I get to my stitch marker. I just finished round 31, so I have my 52 stitches, and at this point, if you would like to stuff your project, you can go ahead and do that. I think I'm going to do mine after round 32 though, because I always like to wait until it's a little bit more closed. But for round 32, we're doing another decreasing round. So let's start off with our invisible decrease into the first 2 stitches. And this is round 32. So here's my 2 stitches. I'm going to go into the front loop only of the first one and the second one without yarning over yet. Now after we have our 3 loops, let's yarn over, pull through the first 1, 2, yarning over and pulling through the last 2. So now let's single crochet into the next 11 stitches. Okay, so I just finished single crocheting my 11 stitches. Now I'm going to recap what I just did. I did an invisible decrease into the first stitch, well, the first 2, and then I single crocheted into the next 11. Now we're going to repeat those 2 steps until we end up with 48 stitches total in this round. At the stitch marker, you will end off with a single crochet. And for this round, this is the last time I'm going to show the invisible decrease a second time. So let me go ahead and do that right now. So going in with these 2 stitches, I'm going to do an invisible decrease. So let's go into the front loop only of that first one, going into the next one to do the same thing. There's my 3 loops. I'm yarning over, pulling through the first 1, 2, yarning over, pulling through the last 1, 2. Now I have to single crochet 11 times and repeat those 2 steps until I get 48 stitches total in round 32. Just finished round 32, so I have my 48 stitches, and now I'm going to stuff her up. I'm only going to go about like right here. I'm not going to put too much stuffing in it because we still have a couple ways to go. Okay, so the way that you stuff this, it does kind of matter. I already have some stuffing in there, but you know, it can change the shape depending on how like you put in your stuffing. So what I like to do is just kind of fluff it out a bit. And then when I push it in, let me put a little bit more. Okay, so when I have all of my stuffing in, what I like to do is kind of like push it flat to make sure I'm not overstuffing anything and there's like no weird lumps later on. So as you can see, it looks like it's a little bit too much, so I'm going to take some out. And then as I stuff it, I'll make it flat. Well, I want mine's flat. Okay, so I want it flat like this, and then like when you go at the legs, make sure it's not like too much stuff or else you have some weird lumps. So you can just shape it and then add as much stuffing as you need or whatever your preference is. So now that I finished stuffing it, let's move on to round 33. In round 33, we're going to start off with our invisible decrease. So let's go into our first 2 stitches, and we're only going into the front loop only of the first one and the second one. Now we have our 3 loops on the hook. Let's yarn over, pull through the first 1, 2, yarn over, pull through the last 1, 2. Next we have to single crochet into the next 10 stitches. So okay, so I just finished my single crochet of 10, and now going in for my recap. I started off with an invisible decrease into the first 2 stitches, and then I single crocheted into the next 10 stitches. Now I have to repeat those 2 steps until I get to my stitch marker, where I should end up with 1 single crochet left, and I will have a total of 44 stitches in round 33. Now that I have 44 stitches in round 33, let's go on to round 34, where we're going to do another decreasing round. So let's start off with our normal invisible decrease. So let's go into our first 2 stitches, and we're going into the, remember, the front loop only of the first one and the second one. Then I'm yarning over, going through the first 1, 2, yarning over, going through the last 1, 2. So now we're going to single crochet into the next 9 stitches. Alrighty, so now going to my recap. This is round 34, and we started off with an invisible decrease, and then we single crocheted into the next 9 stitches. Now you have to repeat those 2 steps all the way through until you get to your stitch marker, where you should have 1 single crochet left, and you end up with 40 stitches in total. I have my 40 stitches in round 34, so now let's go on to round 35 for another decreasing round. So let me just get my hook in. Okay, so let's go into our first 2 stitches, and we're going to do our invisible decrease. So again, just into the front loop only. There goes my first one. Now doing my second. Into that second stitch, there's my 3 loops, yarning over and pulling through the first 1, 2, yarning over, pulling through the last 1, 2. So now we have to single crochet into the next 8 stitches. Okay, so you can guess what's going to happen next. We're going to do our recap. We just did an invisible decrease, and then we single crocheted into the next 8 stitches, and now you have to repeat those 2 steps until you end up with a single crochet at the stitch marker, and you should have a total of 36 stitches in round 35. I just finished round 35, so I have my 36 stitches in total in this round. Now I'm just going to stuff it a little bit more because I kind of want to shape it. So you can see that it's starting to curve in like this. I actually want it to look like this. So I'm just going to shape it with my stuffing, and of course once you keep decreasing, we're going to stuff it a little bit more, so you can't really fix it too much yet, but I do just want to add this in now. Just took forever reshaping this, but anyways, let's go on to round 36 now. So for round 36, we're doing another invisible decrease, or I mean decreasing round. Sorry, my mind is everywhere right now. Okay, so let's start off with our invisible decrease into the first 2 stitches. So let's go into the front loop only of this guy, and then the next guy. And now we have our 3 loops on the hook. Let's yarn over and pull through the first 1, 2 loops, yarn over and pull through the last 1, 2. Next, we're going to single crochet into the next 7 stitches. Okay, for round 36, what we just did was an invisible decrease and then a single crochet into the next 7 stitches. So once you repeat those 2 steps all the way through until you get to your stitch marker, you should have a total count of 32 stitches in this round. At your stitch marker, you should have 1 single crochet left to do. I finished round 36, so I now have my 32 stitches. Going on to round 37, we're going to start off with our usual invisible decrease. And it's getting a little bit harder to show because she's getting bigger now, so I don't have that much room. But for round 37, let's start off with our invisible decrease. So we're going into the front loop only of our stitches, yarning over, pulling through the first 1, 2, yarning over, pulling through the last 2. And this time we're going to single crochet into the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4. For round 37, we just did our invisible decrease and then we single crocheted into the next 4 stitches. You want to repeat this all the way through until you get to 26 stitches in total, and at the end you will end off with a decrease. So I just finished round 37 and I have my 26 stitches. So at this point I'm just going to stuff it a little bit more. I'm going to stuff it more a little bit later as well. Moving on to round 38, we're going to start off with our usual invisible decrease. We're almost done, guys. Okay, so let's go into our front loop of these first 2 stitches. It's going to be a little bit harder because we're going into such a small space now, but let me just get in there. Okay, there's the first one. Now into the second one. Now I'm going to yarn over and just pull through both, yarning over and pulling through my last 2, and this time we're going to single crochet into the next 2 stitches. That was 1 and 2. 2. Okay, there we go. So now you just want to repeat the invisible decrease and single crocheting into the next 2 until you get 19 stitches in total. At the end, you're going to end off with a decrease here. So I'll be back after I finish this row. I just finished round 38 and I now have my 19 stitches in this round. So for round 39, all you're doing is just single crocheting this entire round. So I will finish that part off camera, but just single crochet 19 times for this round. Just finished single crocheting 19 times. I also removed my stitch marker because that's going to be my last row, and then I also stuffed it as well. The more you stuff it, the more it's going to curve up like this. So this is what it currently looks like. And now we're going to close it. So I already cut off my yarn. So what you need to do is just, when I close this up, there's going to be a little bit of an opening like this much. Well, it's kind of big, but it's going to be about that big. If you don't want that opening, what you could do is do another decreasing round. So you would just do a single crochet, then decrease, single crochet, decrease. But I'm not going to do that because the opening for mine, I'm going to add the stem, and I do make it a little bit thicker. So if you don't want that big of an opening, I'll probably insert a picture of what it will look like once I'm done, so you don't have to forward ahead, but I'll insert that clip now. This is what the opening will look like if you don't do another decreasing round. So this is what mine looks like, but I will be adding the stem in later, and then I'll just glue it down so it'll close up a little bit more, and the stem is a little bit thicker, but you can go ahead and do another decreasing round if you don't like how big this opening is. Okay guys, so this is me editing, and I do want to suggest that you actually go ahead and do one more row of the decreases. So I know this opening is big. I've done this twice now and I think it's fine, but I'm actually going to suggest that you just go ahead and do a decrease and then 1 single crochet, decrease, 1 single crochet into that 19 stitch round, because I do feel like it's big and it looked fine. So this is the other one I did, and it turns out fine, but you know, the weight of some yarns, I don't know if everyone's going to be using big twist or not, but if you use something else, I feel like it might turn out different. So what I do suggest is just go ahead and do the decreasing round and then follow me when I do start to weave everything in. Now if you don't want that opening, you can go ahead and do another decreasing round, but if you're going to do it like mine, let's cut off some yarn, and then what you're going to do now is just pull the yarn through after you cut it, and we're going to secure this closed. So now that you cut your yarn, what we can do is go into the stitch right after where your yarn is. So it will be this one here, and then you're just going to take your yarn and pull it straight through, and then you're going to repeat that all the way until you get back to this side. So I'll show that again. Going into the next stitch, just inserting my hook through, grabbing the yarn and pulling it straight through, and then I'll do that again into this one. I'm just going to go all the way around doing this so I can tighten it up at the end. Now that I finished weaving it all the way around, I'm just going to take this yarn and then tighten it up. This is what the opening will look like if you don't do another decreasing round. So this is what mine looks like, but I will be adding the stem in later, and then I'll just glue it down so it'll close up a little bit more, and the stem is a little bit thicker. Okay, so now I'm just going to secure this off by going into the next stitch and inserting my hook, pulling this yarn through, but I'm not going to pull all the way, just enough until I have a loop here, and I'm going to take this yarn and insert it into the loop, and that's just one way I will secure it. I think I'll do that one more time, going into the next stitch after pulling this yarn through, not all the way, just enough until I have a loop, insert this yarn through, and then I'm going to stuff this yarn back in. Once you weave everything in, this is what it should look like. And before I end off this video, I think I will just go ahead and do the leaf and show you what it would look like just in this clip. But if you want to go ahead and move on to part 2, I'll see you in part 2 where we're going to be focusing on making the eye. This is what it looks like with the stem. As you can see, I did have to wrap it around a little bit thicker with all the green yarn, but that's what it looks like. And I think the reason was because this color yarn in Watermelon was much thinner than the Big Twist one in Varsity Orange, I think it was. So for that reason, it couldn't really close up as much as this one did. So that's why I do suggest doing the extra row of decreases, but this is what it currently looks like so far.